Are we going? Should I sing songs?
Yeah. Well, Vincent's gonna launch it here. Vince, you wanna? We're just gonna wait for people. Micah, play some background music for now.
Yeah, that's cool.
We've got a couple more minutes, gents.
Yeah, I'll
but
just
you're more than welcome
around.
to keep playing. Thanks, Micah.
Sounds great, Micah.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Vincent Kimura. I'm the Waimanalo chapter president of the Hawaii Farmers Union United. And we really appreciate both Paul Stamets and Micah Nelson on our 11th music and speaker series. To open it up, I want to introduce Vincent Mina, the president of the Hawaii Farmers Union and the Hawaii Farmers Union United Foundation.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to our launching of this year's speaker music series. So excited to have brother Paul and Micah here tonight to open it up and putting it on Eventbrite to get people to actually sign in for this free event. It's sold out, so we were really excited about that. Didn't surprise us, so because of the level of expertise that's here tonight and just altruistic spirit of these two brothers of different mothers. And so I want to, Micah, I'm in the middle of painting my house, and the other day I bought Micah's album on Bandcamp, Window Rock from 2019, and just had it on my headphones as I was painting all day, and it was just wonderful. Just love his lyrics, your lyrics, Micah, and Micah is such a good friend in the spirit of HFUU and about regenerative agriculture and rebuilding our soils, and so it's been a real heartening friendship, and so it was appropriate for me to get him to play tonight. And so Micah, please launch this tonight, and thank you again.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, man. I'm just really excited to be existing on the same planet in the same cosmic tiny blip of time as you and Paul, let alone part of this cool virtual hang. I have just deep, profound respect for both of you guys and your work. So thanks for inviting me. Give up to the world, she's winning. Live up to the way she's living, we know nothing, and nothing is just, it's just not for us to know. Cried about a dream that's dying, climbed upon the tree of life. Now I know I own nothing, and nothing is free. It's not for me to own. Give up to the world, she's winning. Live up to the way she's spinning, we know nothing,
Sweet, brother, sweet, sweet. Love it. Song open up.
I'll do one more, and then I want to hear you guys talk about mycelium and regenerative farming.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Everything, 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 everything is bullshit. It's bullshit. Everything, 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 everything is bullshit. It's bullshit. It came out of a bull. It landed on the ground. It grew a little mushroom. And then a hairy ape man, he put it in his mouth. He started having thoughts, all kinds of ideas. Grew himself a little ego. Invented a new language, but then he built a tower, designed a system of power. You know, I read it in the paper. He made a tiny computer that fits inside your hand. Communicate across the planet. Look back into the cosmos. Post a picture for your Facebook. Make a profile on your Snapchat. Murder people from a distance. And laugh at videos of cats. Everything, 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 everything is bullshit. It's bullshit. Oh, everything, 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 everything is bullshit. It's bullshit. It's just nonsense.
Right on, my brother. Love it. Love it.
All right, you guys take it away.
Right on, Micah. Well, thank you, brother. That was awesome. I love your music, man.
Thank you, Vincent. I love you.
Good stuff, man. So, here we are, again, just a little bit about the Farmers Union, folks, that those of you that are on that may not know what we are or who we're about, what we're about. We were formed in 2010. We are a chapter of a chartered chapter of the National Farmers Union, which means that basically we had a vote at the table at our board meetings, which start tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock. Our convention meeting, the National Farmers Union Convention, is next Thursday. We have 3 delegates this year, and 2 of our chapter presidents, Robert from Hana and Reba from Haleakala, will be delegates. We have 13 chapters across the state doing some really wonderful work through our Farm Apprentice Mentoring Program. We have the project in Lahaina called Ku'ia with Kamehameha Schools and restoring the breadfruit forest over there in Lahaina. And all of our chapters create value in their regions through Farmers Union. Hana has a wonderful farmers market that they just celebrated their 1-year anniversary, and giving out scripts to the elders there in Hana and the community through the mayor's program here on Maui. And Kahumana Farms is a food hub there in Waianae, and our Kona chapter has a food hub with Maureen Data, our secretary, state secretary. Waimanalo with Vincent Kimura is our president there, is doing wonderful work. And then we have Drake Weinert in East Hawaii. Here's a great picture of our convention in 2019 that we had on Mahipono land. And it was an amazing conference, as you can see by all the faces. Everybody was stoked at the level of expertise we had there. And you see Micah here in the middle, to the left. It was great. It was a great time, great weekend. And this past year, we had it online, and we were able to, because we had it online, we were able to bring people in internationally. We had Dr. Zach Bush, as you can see in the picture here, and Paul Stamets and Micah Nelson basically curated a concert that was a 2.5-hour concert. We had Joel Salatin, Dr. Elaine Ingham, and Micah's dad, Willie Nelson, and his brother Lucas played on that concert. It was just an amazing 4 days. It was a wonderful 4 days. Had over 55 sessions, 55 presentations. We had panel discussions, and it's still available online at our website. As a matter of fact, if anybody signs up for membership or renews his membership, we're going to give some of that convention away in doing that. So there's a lot of value here for Farmers Union and what we're doing here locally. And yeah, you can see we had Jack Johnson and Jesse Colin Young and Mike Love, and Gail Swanson and Flea and Tavana. Yeah, it was just Pat Simmons and his dad. It was just wonderful. Been a big fan recently of Sonny War, George Kahanumoku and his music. Yeah, it was great. Drew Martin and the Makana. It was an amazing concert. So we're really fortunate to have people in our corner that are truly about what we stand for, and that is rebuilding our soils to grow the most healthy food on the planet. And here we are in the middle of the Pacific. We're in a unique opportunity to be able to do that. And with friends like Paul Stamets, that's here tonight, who are doing the work. Paul's doing the work in the trench, going under the ground, literally, and tapping into that mycelial network that we have under the ground into creating extracts that is now showing up to defend the bees, to make the bee colonies healthy. And Paul recently received FDA approval to do work through San Diego State University on exploring the world of COVID and how the mycelial network can, in fact, address that. So this is really cutting edge, and yet at the same time, this man has been so altruistic in his path forward. He's created immune defense supplements for people. He's written books, Mycelium Running, and also I'm going to ask him to speak about his other book that he has out that's just basically a guide on healthy on mushrooms for your health and well-being. And without further ado, please, I'd like to introduce our illustrious speaker tonight, Paul Stamets. Aloha, Paul's 2 hours later for both you and Micah. Thank you for being here tonight and sharing your wisdom and your work.
Aloha. Thank you, Vincent. And thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure to hear you. And I like that song in particular. So yeah, I just have a few minutes to speak, but I think it's really important that people understand that habitats have immune systems, just like we do. And I think mycelium is a cellular bridge that joins the two. And what that means is, I elaborated this idea a long time ago from one of my journeys, you might say. But there's some empathic truths that one realizes when they're in contact with nature. And I think farmers, are actually soil scientists by their very nature. They're in contact with the microbiome. They understand that soils are living. There's more than 10 billion microbes in a single gram of soil, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of species of bacteria. And yet the mycelium can be more than 8 miles in a single cubic inch. And when you understand this, the mycelium is setting up a microbiome because of its antibiotic and probiotic properties. The mycelium sets up these guilds of microorganisms. And the complexity and the biodiversity in the microbiome really gives us our soil's strength. And every species has a skill set. They've evolved to have alliances. They also fend off pathogens. And these guilds set up communities that then interrelate with each other. And we have a really huge problem on the near event horizon. And this is something that everyone should be quite concerned about, where regenerative agriculture, I think, is the solution. Because of the use of phosphate fertilizers, which can be very effective because plants need phosphorus, but the phosphate form is the phosphorus that they absorb, but they're not very good at absorbing. When you topically put phosphate fertilizers, much of it runs off into the ocean. This is very bad for the coral reefs, as many of you know. And so, but what that does is disrupts the microbiome in the soils. And so when you add these external fertilizers, you're defeating this very complex communities, these guilds of microorganisms that have evolved for literally millions of years to set up sustainable habitats. So, the fungal networks, and there's several different categories. There are saprophytic fungi that, like oyster mushrooms, but many of these plants benefit from the mycorrhizal species. And there's ectomycorrhizal fungi that grow on the outside of the roots of plants. And there are the arbuscular fungi that grow inside of the roots. Well, they both convey phosphorus and they mineralize the rocks. This is what fungi do. And the plants secrete carbohydrates and sugars. And the fungi are providing phosphorus and other minerals in an absorbable form. But when you get into industrial agriculture, you start, growing the same crop, monocropping. This is very, very different than how these habitats have evolved. And then you defeat these mycorrhizal fungi by using fertilizers with phosphorus. And so you dismantle, in a sense, the natural immune system of the soil that is giving nutrients to plants. And then successively, over time, and some great research results of papers have been published in Nature and Science and a number of other journals showing that because of this monoculturing of crops and because of using fertilizer, the carbon bank in the soil is disrupted. And within very, very quickly, 70% of the carbon within 6 years becomes resident in bacterial populations. Well, and it takes about 70 years before 75% of that carbon becomes then resident. This is with not then tilling the soil, not farming. When you let it go back into a natural state, it takes that long for 75% of the carbon to begin trained inside the mycelial networks that then begin to create these guilds that then can draw up the nutrients to feed the plants. So we are running out of phosphorus. We have 100 years left of phosphorus on this planet. Wow. We peak in 9 years. And 9 years, we're peaking. And with the explosion in population, the increase in the need for food, we are in a phosphorus deficit decline that is going to be devastating for conventional agriculture. Regenerative aquaculture is actually the solution. But think about it, it's going to take several decades, maybe up to 70 years, for us to be able to regenerate the soils so they're healthy enough to be able to provide the phosphorus and other minerals that are so necessary for plants. So conventional agriculture has been a quick fix. It's been very productive, very successful at feeding our hugely explosive population. But this is not sustainable. We have to look at sustainable systems, and with a worldwide crisis in phosphorus, we have very little alternative, except we have a great solution, and that is reinvesting in fungal networks. So that's what I kind of want to bring to the table is regenerative agriculture is really a sustainable over the long term. Conventional agriculture is not sustainable in the short term. So I think that's something that people should be aware of.
Yeah, and right on, Paul. Thank you for that. And, you know, an agricultural icon I stand on the shoulders of, who passed a few years back, Jerry Brunetti, used to say the good news is in the bad news. And, you know, the fact that with regenerative agricultural practices and understanding more about the mycelial network, we're able to sequester carbon in the soil where it belongs, as opposed to the sky and the ocean. So I really appreciate the articulation that you've provided in this respect. And, you know, here in Hawaii with our organization, we're working at the level to be able to grow cover crops, to have a cover crop seed industry, to be able to move in that direction to rebuilding our fragile soils, fragile volcanic soils here in Hawaii. And so with that, with the work that you've done, could you speak to basically how that has interfaced with agriculture?
Well, cover crops, you know, and I was just speaking to you earlier, we just planted, I bought $900 worth of clover seeds because I have beehives, and I had basically too many beehives for the pollinating plants in my area. And I realized, oh my gosh, I need more pollinating, more plants so the bees can harvest the pollen. So, you know, clover is a great cover crop. It also is very important for bees. And so this big discovery that myself, you know, I had these waking dreams and these epiphanies, and driven by some of my spiritual experiences, I will say. And then I had to say a waking dream about saving the bees using mushroom mycelium. Mm-hmm. And this was a crazy idea. And I literally had someone virtually hang up the phone with me with the University of California at Davis when I started the conversation saying, my name is Paul Stamets, I'm a mycologist, and I had a dream. He said, wow, see you later, click. So when I called up Washington State University to talk to Steve Shepard, I you know, laid it on thick. You know, I'm a TED speaker, you know, and all this other stuff. But I've been working with the BioShield program of the U.S. Defense Department after 9/11, and I found a mushroom, a series of mushrooms, polypore mushrooms. You have them in Hawaii, the reishi conchs, and they grow in trees. And they were very, very potent in their antiviral activities, as proven by the BioShield program against flu viruses, herpes, and pox viruses. And so I made this discovery. You can Google Stamets, smallpox, NPR here, you know, see a vetted press release from the Department of Defense. And we had the top 10 hits of more than, it says 200,000, but it's actually more than 2 million samples surveyed, because after 9/11, they're concerned about weaponizable viruses. And so they reached out to me because I'd written an article on antivirals from mushrooms. So I found several species of these polypore mushrooms, these wood conchs, are highly active against viruses that infect birds, chickens, you know, bird flu, swines, and, you know, people, pox. And these zoonotic viruses like bird flu and swine flu, H1N1 for swine, H5N1 for bird flu, you know, of course, they infect humans. And so I then put this together for the bees. And then Steve Shepard at Washington State University, fortunately, did not hang up on me. And we developed this incredible relationship with Washington State University. And article got published in Nature and Scientific Reports. It just hit an altmetric score of 900. That's a big deal for us people who publish. but it's in the top 1% of all articles ever published in a Nature publication ecosystem, because it showed these extracts from mycelium reduced, in one case, viruses in bees with one treatment, 45,000 to 1. And no one had ever seen that. There was no treatment at all for reducing viruses in bees. And our most recent research shows that it extends longevity. This is important because bees used to fly for 9 days. When you see bees on a flower, they're the last few days of their lives, but now the range, the lifespan of the flight lifespan is around 4 days. So they pollinate more than 1,000 flowers per day. So that's losing 5,000 flowers from one bee. His life been shortened from 9 to 4. So I'm looking at this, I thought, wow, this is amazing. These polypore mushrooms reduce viruses in swine and birds, pox viruses, and they reduce viruses in bees. And so one of these mushrooms is an old growth mushroom called agarikon. And so we had published on this, and what's unique about agarikon, even though it's been used for thousands of years, it was first used by the Greeks, and the first materia medica is called elixirium ad longum vitam, the elixir of long life, by Dioscorides, but it's also used by the First Nations of the Pacific here in North America. And they also discovered this mushroom to have potent anti-inflammatory properties. So we started looking at growing the mycelium, which is sustainable because the wood conchs are really rare for agarikon. We don't want people to pick them, but the mycelium is sustainable. So we started looking at this, and we did some publications, and then COVID has come along. It was actually University of California, San Diego. We went through the IRB, the Institutional Review Boards. It was a team of us. It's not me, please. This is a group effort of other scientists who had the aha moment. Oh my gosh, Paul's onto something really big, and validated the science. We got through the FDA, and so we were approved for a COVID clinical trial using agarikon and turkey tail, which also grows in Hawaii. And so we're not saying that this is a cure for COVID. Let me be very, very clear about this. Health and disease is a multifactorial equation. When you string these variables together, the end result is health or disease or longevity or in brevity of life. But we think this is one factor because of the anti-inflammatory properties that we can upregulate general immunity. And the way that we think these extracts are working is they activate receptors in the immune system, but they augment many of your innate antiviral defenses, but they don't increase inflammation. And typically when you have an immune response, it coincides with inflammatory responses. So many of you have heard about the cytokine storm. And this is the overamping of the immune system, subsequent to infection. And so we're able to downregulate the cytokine storm. They're called interleukin 10s and interleukin 1RAs. We stimulate those, which are anti-inflammatory cytokines, but we also then enhance innate immunity. So what we're trying to see is if we can shorten the severity of the disease period in terms of its length and its intensity, so people don't have to go to the hospital. So we're hoping this will be an adjunct therapy to conventional medicine. It's not a replacement. It's not a cure. I mean, wonderful it was, but we have no expectation of that. So we've gone through it's 6 patients for a sentinel safety study. Now we're recruiting 132 patients for a phase 1 clinical trial. You can go to clinicaltrials.gov and look this up. And we're hoping that this will be one more tool in our immune kit to be able to help people lessen the effects of COVID. The real big problem that we face now is from the long haulers, and the dumbing down the inflammatory consequences of COVID is having a downstream effect that is going to have having a massive collateral damage, causing depression, neuropathies, and other problems. So
right.
That's where the other kinds of mushrooms come in to help.
Well, so true. I just read that Hawaii has a great senator who's or a congressman who's bringing a bill to legalize psilocybin for therapeutic use.
Wow.
I was reading about that, and one of the people objecting saying, this is terrible. People will be driving around on magic mushrooms. Well, no, you don't want to drive on magic mushrooms. You want to be on the floor in front of a fire. You don't want to go anywhere, right? So, but the research on the antidepressant effects of psilocybin is now really well established. More than 40 universities have been approved by the FDA for psilocybin clinical studies specifically. And we have more depression now because of COVID, and all of us do. So there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and with the opioid crisis and such, they 60 Minutes did an expose with John Hopkins on psilocybin, and so yeah, it's definitely more into the mainstream thanks to your efforts along the way. So we'll see, and you point out the importance of decriminalizing it, go to that direction. Yeah, could you speak a little bit to that, just in the spirit of why you go that route instead of trying to...
I think we have to be very understanding of those people who have had a fear of illegal drugs, who drank the Kool-Aid, of the Nixon administration. All recreational drugs are bad. And psilocybin has been put into an LSD, and some other psychedelics have been put into a Schedule 1. Schedule 1 of the Federal Drug Code means there's highly addictive and no medical benefit. Well, anyone who's eaten psilocybin mushrooms know they're not highly addictive. You eat them the next day, you go, no way, I'm not touching those for months. Because you have to process. So they're not addictive, and they do have medical efficacy. My team and I, we populate a website called mushroomreferences.com. It's unbranded. It's just for physicians and scientists, and also the legal experts, to look at all the clinical studies that have been published. So it's a great resource, mushroomreferences.com. You can see all the psilocybin clinical studies that have been published and all the other research that's out there on the medicinal properties of mushrooms. But this is really exciting because the complexity of the immune system and the complexity of your neurological being is incredibly complicated. And what our ancestors have been able to discover is selecting out, I make the analogy, it's like library books, about 140,000 species of mushrooms, and about 14,000 have been identified, about 10%. But it's like our ancestors went into the library of nature and started selecting out each species and testing them. And from that, we've culled it down to about 50 species that interface with our microbiome very well and just have the right balance of constituents to give us immune and health benefits. And the neurogenesis benefits are something combined with the anti-inflammatory and the immune upregulation to put you in a state of immune readiness, really leads to homeostasis and, I think, longevity. So this is really amazing. And the reason why our article, I think, is in the top 1% of all articles in Nature is because for the first time, we've been able to show a natural product is more potent than a pharmaceutical.
Beautiful. Well, the whole pharmaceutical cartel and the petrochemical cartel has dumbed down a lot of people in the spirit of not tapping into the natural world. It boggles my mind to think that folks think that we have to reinvent nature instead of just slowing down to connect with nature. And so you point that out very well in Fantastic Fungi. We got to show, thanks to you, we got to show the movie last year at the National Farmers Union Convention, and that was a big hit. So, there's some really nice inroads happening on a national level, thanks to your work. And I wanted to take a look. There's a question here. Our president of the East Hawaii chapter is a leader in Korean natural farming practices, also is an educator in that respect. And he was basically saying, and I've also, I'm a practitioner in that we're growing our fungal networks through harvesting indigenous microorganisms from the forest, and then, culturing that on mill run of wheat, which is basically, we had that tested, and mill run of wheat is actually loaded with biostimulants. So we're able to then take that product as a compost, in a sense, grow it out with just regular soil, and then that becomes even stronger to dress the plants with, to grow the fungal network. So so you're talking about 75 years of remediating. It seems like we're getting some traction just by going down this road. Can you have you had any experience around Master Cho's work with what he's doing with using on-farm inputs?
No, a little bit, but the whole concept of transplantation of a microbiome from a healthy ecosystem into another ecosystem, this is, I think, a really good idea. It's like, you know, this concept of effective microorganisms. And for a while, I was a little skeptical about it, but as I dug into it more, basically you're using the complexity of the microbiome, and then you're making applications of it. So we just was awarded a grant from NASA for terraforming Mars and asteroids using fungi. And
Astromycology.
yeah, no, it's finally coming out. No, there's going to be a press release coming out of NASA in a few weeks, and this is really exciting because what we have to grow plants, we have to create soil. So fungi were the first organisms that came to land. They started munching rocks, basically on the beach or the tidal zones or lakes, which go up and down. But at those margins where it's aqueous environment dries, aqueous and dries, those margins at that interface is where life basically leaped out of the water. And then when these fungi started munching rocks, then algae then associated, lichens formed, and then mycorrhizal fungi then developed a handshake relationship symbiotically with plants, and then it became a love affair that continues to this day.
Love it. Well, here in Hawaii, we've been working hard to create our hemp industry, to have our hemp farmers be able to be supported around growing hemp for CBD production, for flower production. Also, to utilize the fiber. Micah's right now growing his own hemp and making hempcrete to put in his walls in his studio up there in the redwoods. And so, one of the things that comes out of hemp, and Doug Fine is on tonight. He's a friend and contributor to our organization and our convention, and is doing work through Acres USA with his hemp course. But the question becomes about the phytoremediation qualities of hemp and what happens. I know, Paul, in the movie, you spoke about using microbes to clean up oil spills and such. So with the phytoremediation of hemp, could you speak to that and what would happen in composting hemp?
Well, when you compost hemp, you're running mycelium and microbes. It can go anaerobic, with the absence of oxygen. So as you build that pile bigger, it goes anaerobic, and it goes through a fermentation process. Acanthocytes run and other organisms. And then when they go through their cycle, then the compost becomes aerobic, then the mycelium comes in and eats the acanthocytes and other anaerobic bacteria. So all of these organisms are secreting enzymes to unlock nutrients. And so there's over, I think, 200 novel enzymes that have been isolated from Basidiomycetes. These are mushroom-forming fungi typically. And so the suites of these enzymes for breaking down toxins gives us an enormous wellspring of potential applications that as we better understand them. But we are straying away from the concept of one species has one target, has one activity. We know these species crosstalk. And when they start talking back and forth and communicating, then these relationships quickly build, like I mentioned, guilds. And so these guilds of communities are created. And then if they have a challenge, the community wants us to survive. And so the members of that community leap to the forefront to be able to gobble up or, the toxin or break down or prevent a pathogen from entering into its biosphere. This is a good example for all of us is I believe biodiversity is biosecurity. We need to celebrate our racial diversity. It is so important genomically. All genomic scientists know this so well. Is that monoculture and just this, the more we isolate ourselves away from community, the more we are susceptible to disease and to non-sustainable systems. And with a problem that I think we face and have encountered is short-term gain is motivating many of the people in the capitalistic system. And this has disrupted, I think, the sustainable views of First Nations, in particular, the idea of 7 generations, looking 7 generations. And this timeline that I mentioned, this is like 70 years, is getting close to that, 20 years in a generation. But the idea of building regenerative agriculture with your view that it's 7 generations downstream, that's when we're going to have this oasis, homeostatic, static environment and ecosystem that I think we can become in balance. But we have to slow down deforestation. We have to invest in regenerative agriculture. We need to support the microbiome in the soils. And this gateway is, Mycelium is the gateway to enable all that to happen, in my opinion.
Right on, Paul. And, you know, the whole growing of roots, you know, that's the whole workaround. Vince, could you free up my screen so I can put a backdrop of that picture of the cover crop? Anyhow, I'm trying to get, I have a background picture I wanted to show. There's a, you know, the work with growing cover crops, and, you know, just like, you know, I got to cover my head out in the sun, otherwise, you know, it eats me up. The whole idea of growing cover crops to have roots grow deeper into the soil to where we can, you know, sequester the carbon and grow that mycelium network. I mean, the video that you had in your presentation at the convention that showed bacteria, you know, crossing within the mycelial network was just amazing. Could you speak a little bit about the you know, as farmers, the importance of in restoring the vitality of our land, and you know, in this picture I'm trying to pull up, but I can't, for some reason I don't have the control of my background right now. But there's a, you know, we're laying down, we're rolling and crimping cover crops and laying them down, so this way we're not upsetting the roots underneath the soil, and then we create a natural weed mat, is the intention with doing this, so that this way we can kind of begin to develop this mycelial network underground. So when we poke holes in the ground, the plants that we plant will then benefit by the immune system that the mycelial network creates. Is that a path forward that, you know, you see as viable?
Yeah, you want to, no-till farming works because the mycelial networks are in place. And some of the most recent research shows that these mycelial networks are superhighways. And if those of you looked at bacteria under a microscope, they're kind of disorganized, they're frenzied, they're moving around, bumping into each other. But the most recent research that I've seen that is just spectacular is that when some of these species of bacteria hit a mycelial strand, it's then this zooms, you know, 50 times faster, and they use these as superhighways for transportation. That's really important, of course, for the benefit, you know, of the food web, because the mycelium helps organize this. Now, my partner is a medical doctor, and she and I came together because of the concept of putting down wood chips, you know, on the ground and not disturbing the ground. And she gets all the credit for this. I was just a grunt, but and not as hardworking as she by far. But we put a garden in up on a remote island in British Columbia. And I think some of our neighbors were quite skeptical because they hadn't seen this. They were all tilling and, you know, doing their compost and everything else. And Dr. Pam, you know, and I got together and we tried not to disturb the soil. We disturbed it a little bit. But the idea is that you start the plants, you get them as high as you can. So and then we basically leave all the mulch that on the ground. In this case, we use wood chips, quite thick. And then we would dig down a little hole and we'd stick the plant in the hole. We cover up with wood chips. And the plants are sticking up high enough above the wood chips. And then the wood chips, as they decompose, 10 inches of wood chips become 1 inch of soil in about 6 months to a year. Right. So the decomposition of the wood chips releases all these nutrients. Right. And also, because of all the wood chips, it suppressed weeds. And right. the tree and the plants that had already grown up high enough that they became an apex environment, and they provided shade, which then also further inhibited weeds. But we had very little weeding, and our garden just was fantastic.
It's like you're building the Wi-Fi network, and then you're plugging them into it.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's a good analogy.
So, Paul, there's an interesting question here. Are there any saltwater specific microremediation studies?
Saltwater specific microremediation sites.
Studies.
Studies.
Yes.
Well, one of the inventions that I had, and I've open sourced this, I filed a lot of patents. I have quite a few patents, but I open sourced all my micro-remediation and microfiltration patents. And this is a really good thing for people to know, is I created these myco booms with hemp socks. And I use grasses, which most of the oil spills are in estuary environments along the ocean. And so I took basically grasses, I fermented them for 2 weeks, submerged in water, fresh water or salt water, both worked. It goes anaerobic, and then I drained the water, and then it was anaerobically dominant. But when I drained the water, then oxygen becomes a sterilizer, and it kills the anaerobes. And then I inoculate with mycelium of oyster mushroom. It grows like crazy. You don't have to heat, you don't have to pasteurize, you do microbial fermentation. And then you put them into these hemp socks and made mycobooms that could then corral oil spills. And then the mycobooms float. They also are containment, perimeters for keeping the oil, from being harming other environments. And then the enzymes that are being produced by mycelium begin to break down the oil. But something else happened here in the Northwest that was a lot of fun, is that flies came. So we did this out, as tests, in the Puget Sound. And we came back and all these oyster mushrooms were fruiting on salt water, but they're floating on these mycobooms of hemp socks. And we were there just at dusk. And then all these trout started coming and jumping after the flies. And I went, oh my gosh, this is crazy, So yeah, so and inadvertently I created a food, cycle.
Absolutely.
And I thought, oh my gosh, nature is really all connected. And sometimes the best inventions are the ones that we as Luddites, or myself in particular, is when we call it the strategy of benign neglect. My friends and I, we just let it go and see what nature will do. And if you get out of the way, nature usually comes up with a solution. Then it hits you on the side of the head, going, "You idiot!"
Well, Paul, there's a lady on Vince. Can you scroll the chat down, please? Michelle Montgomery, I believe her name is. She's working with the ant lab here in Hawaii. And, I've been talking to them about, are you in touch with Paul Stamets regarding the little fire ant? Because it's been a real problem here in Hawaii around farmers, trying to harvest their fruit trees and being rained on by these little fire ants, which they're not, even though they're little, I say they've got to change the name to burning fire ant. It's really driving people off their farms. And so we'd like to be able to mitigate, that kind of issue. And it's great that she had a question. Vince, can you scroll that down, please? I don't have any control on the chat. Back to Michelle's question. Let's see, Michelle Montgomery, she was talking about, well, anyhow, you have to keep scrolling down, Vince. Going back up near. Anyhow, there's a.
It's all the way at the bottom.
Okay, keep going, Vince. All the way at the bottom. So basically, though, Paul, she's doing work with the Hawaii Fire, the Ant Lab, and I would love to be able to bring that forward to the Department of Agriculture, and being that I'm on the board to get some money and research to dealing with this in a way that we can, get the natural, the non-sporulating mycelium to go in there and take these guys out.
Yeah, I have, that's another, I came up with this discovery and of controlling fire ants, carpenter ants, all ants and termites. It's kind of a Trojan horse attraction. The most common entomopathogenic fungus in the soil is Metarhizium. It's literally under every footstep you take. It's one of the most dominant species. And ants and termites are constantly cleaning themselves to get these Metarhizium spores off of them because they're sticky. And if they stay on them within an hour or two, a hyphal peg will penetrate through his exoskeleton. And so there's been this dance of, the fungi like to eat just like us, right? And the ants are trying not to be eaten by the fungus. So, which side of the life cycle are you on? but the ants and termites will avoid this Metarhizium spores because they've learned that they're infectious. And so they are extremely repelled by these Metarhizium spores. And I, through, again, an accident, more or less, I created a pre-sporulating form of this fungus, and the opposite occurred. It became hyper attractive to termites. And termites and carpenter ants, they guard the queen in the nest. And you can try to kill as many fire ants as you want, but the queen's just producing thousands of them, some of them thousands per day. And it's just a losing battle. You basically have aerial bombardment, and you'll never, if you don't get to the queen, you're not going to be able to solve the problem. So this Metarhizium fungus, pre-sporulating, it tricks the carpenter ants and the termites or other ants, and they take fragments of it right past the guards, and they actually give it to the queen, and it spreads throughout the entire nest. Many ants are fungus farmers. So leafcutter ants in particular, they have fungus farms, and they do that for immune benefit and for other reasons I don't want to get into. But they mimic this as sort of mycomimicry of potentially a beneficial fungus that they would otherwise cultivate. And so this Trojan horse form of Metarhizium comes in, and then they distribute it throughout the nest. The whole nest becomes colonized, and then woof, the whole nest then is consumed by Mycelium. The queen is killed, and then it sporulates, and then it becomes the spore repellency property prevents the termites and the ants from going into that location for a very long time. I protected my house for 25 cents for about 10 years because once this fungus sporulates, the repellency property is so strong.
Love it.
This has been a long slog. It'll take me $4 to $6 million to get this to market. I'm up against the pesticide industry, and I don't want to tell you all the things that have happened. And so saving the bees had a lot better karma than trying to fight the big pesticide companies. So
how's the bee, your bee network thing, your bee homes?
Yeah, we have a citizen scientist project that we are giving away 10,000 of these. If you go, we have I don't want to mention a website. So if you go and you just look for it on the web, you'll find this little invention for citizen scientists that I've created. And these are basically how to feed the bees with the extracts, wild bees, and it helps their immunity. So the problem with colony collapse and honeybees and wild bees is that these viruses are left on flowers, and then when wild bees come in the same flower, the honeybee that was infected with these viruses, then the bumblebees and the wild bees become infected. So it was stated to me there are no virus-free bees in the world anymore. It's spread like a pandemic, and it truly is. Many of the articles state that this is a pandemic. It's infected bees all over the world. It's the biggest threat to worldwide food biosecurity is the collapse of bee colonies, which farmers are intimately dependent upon. So, but if you stay tuned, we're mobilizing this. We just found a hemp plastic because we didn't want to.
I was looking into that today too.
Yeah, hemp plastic. I mean, WTF, why didn't I know about this before? It's 4 times more expensive, but it's so much better than we look at ocean
in the short run, maybe.
Right. We look at ocean recycled plastic, which I'd love to use, but it's so much more complicated than people realize. Yeah. So the hemp recycled plastic, I love to take a few more questions, and then I should probably go.
Well, Paul, thank you, brother. We're pretty much at the end too of this hour. It's just blasted by and rightfully so. You're just chock full of wonderful information. Everybody's stoked to hear. Let's see, Vince, I can't scroll the chat. I don't know why. So it's frozen.
Paul, we've got a question here from one of our farmers. What are the best species of mushrooms to improve their fields' immune systems?
To improve the field's immune systems?
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, it'd be somewhat crop dependent. So I always like to ask, what the target is and what the context is, because there's not one fits all. But the glomus species, which are mycorrhizal, they are ubiquitous, and the glomerales has a lot of glomus species that benefits plants. And it's amazing, in some of the DNA analysis that have been done, there's an enormous conformity of these glomus enteratices is one, and they greatly help the immunity of plants. So I'm sure you have glomus, in Hawaii, and there are endophytic fungi as well. That's an area of great interest, but the glomus ones would be my first suggestion to look into, is what glomus species are resident in Hawaii that are currently they're already part of your plant ecosystem. And then if you look into the glomus species, and they also produce glomulin, which is kind of cool.
Right.
It's kind of it's a jelly, and it holds water. So it's these glomus species are probably one of the most ubiquitous fungi that's beneficial to agriculture. When you're looking at the crop subsequent to the crop harvesting and the refuse piles and debris fields that are created, and then I have lots of different target specific species to include in that concept. But we want to support the mycorrhizal species, the endophytic species, and the saprophytic species, and it's a huge consortium of 3 different separate groups of fungi, but they also we now are cross-talking. So there's a tremendous amount of cross-talking in building these guilds. So
Paul, what is the red top mushroom you grew in your garden that's edible?
Wine cap.
The wine cap, the garden giant.
Yeah, the wine cap. Well,
Yeah.
Charles Tresteter on the island, who's a mycologist here on island, just did it using ohia mulch and grew some really beautiful ones. So it's really nice to see all this coming forward, and more practitioners out there taking all that you're brought forward and making.
Well, that species is exceptional because it kills nematodes. It consumes them and eats them. It
Wow.
Parasitic nematodes.
Yeah, it produces something that is called acanthocytes, and they're spiny little balls, microscopic balls, but they're very, very sharp, spiny things. And it produces this right off the mycelium, and then it stabs the nematode, and then it invades into the carcass. So when you use the garden giant mushroom in your garden, you can get rid of the majority of nematodes because it actually uses them as a food source, and of course they're full and rich of nitrogen. Right. So then you're getting nitrogen back into the soil via the nematodes.
Is it true also that the King Strophoria? Is that the wine cap? Does it pull the water table up towards it?
Yes, it does. And thank you, Micah, for mentioning that. Yeah, all of these fungal mats, when you establish them, they wick moisture and they raise the water tables. Right. So this was seen with permaculture experts in Saudi Arabia. They were mulching, and I had these permaculture experts were like, where do these mushrooms come from? We're in the middle of the desert. And they were mulching around their plants that they had planted. And then, 20 to 30% of the mass, well, let me revise that, 10 to 20% of the mass of straw becomes water when mycelium digests it. So these hydrate habitats, and when you have a water lens like that, it tends to hydraulically lift the water table. And one of the most important things about mycelium is it prevents erosion. So it holds the substrates together.
And that's one of the biggest issues we have here with our soils. And it's just it's a sad commentary in that respect. But we're moving in the direction we need to move in rebuilding our soils. We're really excited about the future in that respect. And
so I will go ahead and mention 2 books, because these are I write books because they are resources. There's Mycelium Running.
Yep.
And this is mostly for outdoor cultivation. this is the textbook used around the world, 600 pages long,
Love it.
25 species, and sugarcane bagasse and ohia and things, other plants like that are mentioned in here as
Thanks
well.
for sharing that, Paul. I was just about to ask you about your books, so thanks for putting them up there. Paul, before we close, I want to put a shout out. You know, you're a brilliant guy for getting an assistant like Lindsay. She's the best. I want to give a shout out to Lindsay. And
I am so blessed with Lindsay, and
yeah,
so I can go ahead and tell you this. She just had an employee review, and this is like never happened before, and so I had to rate her, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. I go, listen, if the scale she's beyond 10. So, you know, what can I say, right? She needs 11 or 12, but the scale's between 1 and 10. And I said, I'm just like so pleased. What I love about my employees is this is not a job. This is mission over margin. We know that we can do something that's paradigm shifting to help the planet. Moreover, we can do it to help the commons. And we have to do it in a economically sustainable. We have to be profitable, to be charitable, but it has to be ecologically rational. And so those 4 concepts come together within our company, and many other regenerative farms are like that. And I'm so honored to have friends like Micah who write songs to inspire this and spread the word of Mycelium. This is something that is truly paradigm shifting, and it's time for us to evolve to a higher state of being. You know, we are not the Homo sapiens of 200,000 years ago. It is time for us to ascend to a higher level of consciousness. And this is why I think psilocybin mushrooms are so important, not only for fighting depression, you know, and PTSD and fighting addiction, but I think they increase intelligence, they increase empathy. And studies have shown that people who have ingested psilocybin mushrooms are more pro-environmental. They're in contact with nature, they're more tolerant, they're more respectful, and they're kinder people. And we need a lot more kinder, smarter people. And I think mycelium and mushrooms are a gateway for us to evolve into a higher level species.
Amen to that, brother. And what a way to end this beautiful session in the shares. I could go on and on. I'm sure we could go on and on with you all night long, Paul, but I want to honor your time and your ability to just chill out before you. Do you get sleep, brother? I don't know how you do a 600-page book and all that you do and get some sleep, but I'll be loving to visit with you in that respect, so I can find out what's your magic here.
So our team, we call our company Starship FP, Starship Fungi Perfecti. I'm a Star Trek kind of guy, but we have some amazingly cool new research that's unfolding, and I can't wait to share it at the right time. So
good. Well, beautiful, Paul. Well, we'll be in touch in the spirit of staying in touch with you, and thank you so much for being part of the HFUU family. You know, your name is embedded in our, thanks to Don DeShane's design from our convention. And for those who want to get access to Paul's work at our convention, you can go to hfuu.org. Please continue to help support HFUU's voice. And the way to do that is through membership. The more members we have, the louder our voice at the legislature. And Maui County has been very supportive of here in Hawaii. And we're hoping that the other counties are going to follow suit. We're working with them right now. So again, thank you very much, Paul. We love you very much, brother, and all the best in your work moving forward. So right. Michael, will you close us out, please?
Sure.
finding your way, making it pay. This world is no ordinary place. La 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 la, living for today. Gotta make a reason for tomorrow. Gotta find a diamond in your sorrow. 'Cause someday you're gonna fly into the sun. There won't be any love left to give you. Someday you're gonna die all alone, and everyone you know will be with you. We'll be with you. Don't gotta be the righteous ones, just gotta be what we become. I wish I could stay, but I'm finding my way. Take a moment, have another day. Find yourself and give it all away. I will ride along my own trail, guided by the highway in my hand. 'Cause someday I'm gonna fly into the sun. I don't care if anyone will be watching. 'Cause someday I'm gonna die all alone, and everyone I know will be with me. Someday we're gonna fly into the sun. I don't know if we'll outrun the burning bridges. Someday we're gonna die all alone, and everyone we know will be with us. Everyone we know will be with us. Everyone we know will be with us. Everyone we know. Please be with us. Everyone you know. Please be with us.
Hana ho, baby, hana ho. What was the name of that song, Micah?
It's called Fifth Song.
All right.
It was the fifth song, and I couldn't think of a name. It's
Find
on a
yourself-
record I did with my friend Sonny War called
Oh,
Particle War
Sweet,
back
sweet,
in the day.
sweet.
Thanks
Well,
for inviting me, you guys. Thank you so much.
You want to do a Hanaho, Micah?
Well, I know it's past Paul's bedtime. I don't want to keep him up too late.
Well, I don't
But,
think it's going anywhere, but find yourself and give it away. So.
All right, here we go.
Find yourself.
This is a new song. It's kind of about, well, it was inspired by one of those trips where it's a real ball breaker, you know, it just really humbling, and you realize that you thought you knew, and we just really don't. You just don't know. You don't know. But it's actually I don't think there's any such thing as a bad trip. It's really in hindsight the one that you needed the most. Shit makes the flowers grow, as they say. So this one is kind of inspired by that. It's called Along the Tiny Road. I was a human yesterday, but not the one I am today. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, I wanted to be friends with you and nullify your point of view. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, I felt compelled to dignify the jeweled locus of my mind. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, but you took me on a mini quest, the ruled surface laid to rest. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road. I felt my thoughts disintegrate, but from myself was no escape. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, you laugh as my mythologies flatten to the gamma keys. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road. I screamed in silence, now I know that I am nothing, let me go. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, I'll take a warning, weathered mind is always watching by my side. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, the truth it often frightens me whenever it enlightens me. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, I was a human yesterday, but not the one I am today. Along the tiny road, so along the tiny road, so long, so long, so long, so long.
Micah Nelson, everybody, aka Particle Kid. Thank you, Micah.
I tried to do my face trumpet there at the end.
I love it.
I got to warm up for that one.
Well, thank you, brother. It was wonderful, beautiful music. Oh, I love your music. And again, Paul Stamets, Micah Nelson, thank you for reopening our speaker series this year. We'd love to have you folks come back at some point. And thank you for supporting HFUU. And for everybody out there, thank you for hanging in there. It's been a wonderful night. Just so excited about what's coming up for us all. You know, like Micah says, you know, everybody stay positive and test negative along the way, and we'll get through this. And thanks for coming in virtually to, you know, get together as best we can. Love to all your families out there, and thank you for supporting HFUU.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you, Vince.
Paul.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Micah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Night.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you, everyone.
Rest
Thanks,
well.
everybody. Love you.
Yeah, love you too.
Farmer.
Aloha.
Love you.